Hey everyone, Graham here from therecordingrevolution.com. We're going to wrap up this Mastering with Stock Plugins mini-series today. We're going to look at using a limiter, using a peak limiter to get your mixes to be louder. And I know that's a huge part of mastering. I think that's the assumption of most people, is that they want mastering to make their mixes louder. Whether you send it off to a mastering engineer to do that, you expect him to bring it back louder. And if you're mastering your own music, I know the common problem is, how do I get my mixes to be louder? They're not loud enough. Okay, so we've already looked at using an EQ to sculpt the sound of our mix, to enhance the sound of our mix. We've looked at compression, two types of compression, in fact, to bring punch and energy and even balance out some low end on our mix. And now we're going to use a limiter. And what we want to do is not just make the mix louder in general, but we want to get it into a competitive range, okay? Now, here's the problem. There's a lot of discussion that has been had over what is dubbed the loudness wars or competitive gain. And I think we're very familiar, if you're into audio at all, with this problem. People perceive louder as better, supposedly, the numbers tell us. And so there was a range, a time in the early 2000s where people were mastering albums way too loud, squashing them with peak limiting in order to get the supposed volume up, and then that would make their tracks stand out on the radio, stand out on iTunes, stand out on people's playlists, whatever. It would get their tracks noticed. We're not going to do that, and I think peak limiting has gotten a bad rap because of that, and because it can just squash the life out of your mix, and I understand that, because literally that's what it's doing. We're going to be turning down the peaks of the loudest parts of your song, transient heavy stuff like snare drums, kick drums, to make the rest of the mix louder. And that's a compromise, because now you lose some of that punch, that dynamic range that sounds so great. So what I want to help you do is use a simple stock peak limiter to bring up the overall level without destroying your transients. And I really don't think it's that hard. I just think there's two visuals to watch to know if you're in the ballpark. And it depends on what DAW you're in. It depends on what your limiter will do. But I want to show you how simple this is, okay? And what I want to do is get your mix to what I think is a competitive volume, which would be a range that if someone did listen to a mix of their favorite band and then your mix came along in their playlist, they wouldn't notice your mix as being overly quiet or anything. They wouldn't notice anything. They'd go, oh, here's the next song. That's what we want to do. We don't want to make it the loudest song in the room. We just don't want it to be the quietest song in the room. Okay? So here's our mix that we've been working on. All right, and we're going to add a limiter. So in Studio One, I'm going to grab, go figure, the limiter. Now, limiters are basically simple compressors that are doing some auto gain, and they work very fast. They have a built-in fast attack, and a lot of times they have this brick wall ceiling. So if you're going to see a limiter, you might be familiar with some of the terminology, but here's all you need to really focus on. You want to focus on the ceiling first. This is telling the limiter what is the absolute roof, the absolute ceiling that I won't let any audio go above. By default, it's going to be 0 dB, which would make sense because above 0 dB FS in the digital world is clipping, and that's bad. But I would submit to you that you don't want to leave the ceiling at 0, because as the math would show us, when you do some conversion at the end to turn this digital file into something that can be played back as analog music on a CD or an MP3, it's got to have to smooth out those ones and zeros, those steps that are so small they look like a rounded bell curve of a wave file. They're not really round, they're just individual mechanical steps. It's going to have to fill in those gaps to smooth out those wave files. In theory, there's a good chance that it could add a little bit of gain on some of the peaks. And I'm talking a little bit of gain. And then every, iTunes, their conversion process, they supposedly add a little bit of gain in this conversion process as part of the After Effects. Point being, it's smart to never set your ceiling at 0 and to back it off. I prefer to work at minus 0.5 dB. I have friends that work at minus 1. I think anywhere in that range you'll be totally fine. So I'm going to set my ceiling at minus 0.5 so that no peak is ever going to cross minus 0.5. So I definitely won't clip, okay? And then what I'm going to do is pull the threshold down. Just like on a compressor, the threshold is when do you want the limiter to engage? If you set it here at minus 0.5 or 0, then the limiter is not working. Okay, it's not going to do anything to our audio, because if you take a look at our audio, I'm going to press play here. Our peaks were hitting at minus 5, minus 6 maybe. So the loudest part of our song here doesn't get anywhere close to the threshold, so the limiter's not working. So all we're going to do is bring the threshold down till it's touching those peaks, and then it's really going to be engaging. But here's the other thing about a limiter. It's automatically raising the gain, the makeup gain, as you turn the threshold down. So think of there being an invisible makeup gain knob that is tied to the threshold. As much as you pull the threshold down, the makeup gain goes up relative to it. So it's as simple as bringing the threshold down and your mix gets louder. What we want to do is look at something to measure how much we should compress, how much we should limit, how loud is loud enough. And it really depends on the limiter. On a limiter that I typically use in mastering, there is peak reduction. So I can see the gain reduction on a meter. Now this would tell me that I would see the same thing here, but I can tell you that this limiter does not show the same gain reduction that another limiter of mine has. So in this scenario, I'm not going to see the gain reduction anywhere, no matter where I pull the threshold down. So I'm going to show you another way to measure loudness, and that's going to be with RMS levels. So if you have a meter like here in Studio One or any third-party plug-in meter that can show you the RMS levels, that's the average volume of your mix. Okay, it doesn't matter what RMS stands for. Root means squared. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that there's peak volume, how loud the peak hits, the loudest point of a song. I think that's pretty obvious. If a peak hits 0, a little clip light comes on, that's your peak volume. The rest of your mix isn't at that volume, just a peak or two happen to be there. That's peak volume. RMS volume is just going to be the average loudness. What's the average volume of all your peaks together combined? That could be something very different. And so what we want to look for is an average volume of anywhere between minus 8 and minus 10 dB. Okay, an RMS volume, average RMS of minus 10 to minus 8. That's a really healthy range that a lot of people who are smarter than me have found to be plenty loud, but plenty musical and have plenty of dynamic range. Now, I understand that different genres will dictate different dynamic range and different RMS. Some genres you want it to be even more compressed. But I say minus 8 to minus 10 is a great starting point for all genres, and then you can compare to some similar music and see if you're in the right ballpark, okay? So in Studio One, these numbers down here, the outside numbers are your peak of the left and the right. The inside white numbers are your RMS of the left and the right. Okay, so if I press play right now with no limiting, looks like my RMS volume is about minus 16. Okay? In the main hook of the song, you want to go to the loudest part of the song where the most is happening. It's about minus 16 is the average volume of my mix. The peak was going way up to, minus 6. So what I want to do is bring that average volume up about 6 or 7 dB because I want to get it from minus 16 to maybe minus 9 or minus 10. Okay, so that's what we're going to do is pull the threshold down and watch that RMS volume go up. Okay, so now keep in mind this is going to get louder in the video, so you might want to turn down your speakers or your headphones because I'm literally going to turn up the mix right now. Here we go. I'm going to bring the limiter a little bit closer to our RMS meter. As I turn the threshold down, you can also watch the RMS volume here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dicen lo que dicen y cuando todo lo que dicen empieza a ser perjudicial para todo gozar, déjalo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bye, 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 bye. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We pulled the threshold down minus 8 dB here on the limiter, and we got the average volume of our mix up from minus 16 RMS to closer to minus 9, minus 10. And it moved around. At one point it hit minus 8.5, it was around minus 10. We're in that ballpark now. Our peak is only hitting minus 0.7, minus 0.5 at the ceiling, but our average volume of the mix is up. So we've done some peak limiting, yes, but we've gotten the volume of our mix up, and we still have a dynamic range of 8, 9, 10, which is a lot of musicality, a lot of dynamics, which is what we feel, which is what makes a mix pop. Squashing a mix doesn't just make it louder, it makes it smaller because there's not much variety. So having that variety is what gives it that pop and that energy. It's as simple as that. We've taken the mix way up in volume. And at this point, if you were going to reference, I would bring in a professionally mastered, finished track, if you haven't already, that is in a similar genre that you like, and bring that up to full volume and flip back and forth between these two. Your mix going through the limiter and processing, and the reference track going through nothing, and flip back and forth and see if you notice any difference. Does your mix sound considerably quieter than the other? If not, you're in the ballpark. If you need a little bit more gain, go for it. But at this point, you've basically taken a mix that was good, done a little bit of EQ to balance it out, to enhance it a bit, to fix the issues that maybe you didn't hear in mixing or that your client didn't hear. You use compression to give it more punch maybe, to even out some of the bottom end, and you used a limiter to bring up the overall volume. And we've basically transformed our mix. So here is our mix before and after with all the processing. We've got the EQ, the compressor, the multiband compressor, and the limiter. I'm going to kick them all on and off. Here we go.
Olvidando todo mal pensar, vamos a bailar y sin reproche, para que si nos hacen tan mal. Oh, 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 ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 ah, bye, 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 bye. Oh, 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 ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, 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 ah. Dicen lo que dicen y cuando todo lo que dicen empieza a ser perjudicial para todo gozar, déjalos. Si tu mente libre va, whoa.
Right? Major transformation there. We've done a lot. Obviously, the louder one sounds better, and that's not really fair. But as you heard in the first two videos, we were transforming this mix all along. And there you have it. There can be a lot more to mastering, believe me. Things like stereo widening, MS processing, saturation, a lot of cool things, mastering reverb, things you can do. And mastering engineers will do whatever they have to do to make a mix good. I recently heard Mike Wells, great mastering engineer. He was speaking at GearFest and said, you get some of those mixes that come in, and they're the half a dB here, half a dB there, little tweak type of mixes, and then the master's done. But then you get mixes in that you really have to just go to town and make it happen to make the mix work. And mastering can be that wide range. For the people that I'm talking to today, a lot of you work on your own music. And so what I'm saying to you is, if you are going to do recording, mixing, and mastering of your own music, try to pretend that you are going to deliver the absolute best mix possible to the mastering engineer. So all he has to do is, like Mike Wells would say, half a dB here, half a dB there. Make your mix sound phenomenal in the recording and mixing phase. So when you get to the mastering phase, it looks a lot like this video series. A little bit of EQ, a little bit of compression, some limiting to get the volume up, and call it a day. In my mind, that is a great goal to shoot for. The EQ, compression, limiting, those are your big three in mastering, and every DAW is going to come with these stock. Start with those tools, get good at those tools, and don't rely on mastering to fix your crappy mix. Turn out a better mix. Mastering will just put it over the edge and get your release ready to go and transfer it to the media that it needs to be on to deliver to the people that you want to hear it, okay? All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Mastering with Stock Plugins series. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you go master some great music in your home studios this week. Talk to you soon.